The explosion rips through the human military outpost on Xerxes, shattering the relative calm of the contested planet. Sergeant Russell Thomas of the United Earth Defense Force lies motionless among the debris, his chest still. As chaos engulfs the base, an alien ship bearing the insignia of the Rakari Red Cross touches down amidst the destruction. Xena, lead paramedic of the Rakari medical team, emerges from the ship. Her iridescent scales shimmer under the planet's twin suns as she surveys the carnage with 4 keen eyes. She spots Sergeant Thomas and rushes to his side, her forearms working in perfect synchronization to assess his condition. Human soldiers raise their weapons, fingers tightening on triggers as the alien approaches their fallen comrade. Xena pays them no heed. Her diagnostic scan confirms Thomas requires immediate resuscitation. Without hesitation, she lowers her face to his. "Stand down!" Colonel Harris barks at his men, recognizing the alien's intent. The soldiers reluctantly lower their weapons, watching with a mix of fascination and revulsion as Xena's alien mouth meets Thomas's lifeless lips. Xena begins mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, her specialized Rakari physiology pumping a potent mixture of oxygen and regenerative compounds directly into Thomas's lungs. Each breath she gives him is a violation of her people's most sacred taboo, physical contact with other species. Yet she persists, driven by her oath as a medical professional. As Xena continues her life-saving efforts, alarms blare throughout the base. "Zorn fighters incoming!" a panicked voice announces over the comms. Colonel Harris curses, torn between evacuating the wounded and preparing for the impending assault. Dr. Ilara Singh, the base's lead xenobiologist, pushes through the gathering crowd. Her eyes widen as she notices a faint glow emanating from where Xena's lips meet Thomas's. Singh's mind races, recognizing the potential significance of this unexpected biochemical reaction between their species. Xena remains focused on her task, oblivious to the commotion around her. She's acutely aware of the risk she's taking, not just to her standing among her own people, but to her very self. Myths speak of dire consequences for Rakari who dare such intimate contact with other races. The seconds stretch into minutes. The glow intensifies. Singh frantically records data on her pad, while Harris barks orders to prepare for the Zorn attack. Human medics stand by, unsure whether to intervene or let the alien continue her work. Suddenly, Thomas gasps. His eyes flutter open, locking onto Xena's alien gaze. For a moment, the chaos fades away as human and Rakari stare at each other, connected by the profound intimacy of life-saving touch. The moment shatters as the first wave of Zorn fighters screams across the sky. Explosions rock the base once more. As the battle begins, Thomas struggles to his feet, supported by Xena's 4 strong arms. Around them, humans and Rakari alike prepare for the fight of their lives, while the seed of something greater, a connection that transcends species, takes root amidst the chaos of war. The Zorn fighters screamed closer, their engines drowning out the chaos on the ground. Colonel Harris's voice cut through the din. "Evacuate all wounded! Move, move, move!" Medics scrambled to comply, loading injured soldiers onto stretchers and rushing them towards the waiting shuttles. Sergeant Thomas, still unsteady on his feet, leaned heavily on Xena's 4 arms. "She comes with us," Thomas rasped, his gaze meeting the colonel's. Harris hesitated, eyeing the alien paramedic warily. Another explosion rocked the base, making the decision for him. "Fine, get him on board," he barked. As they hurried towards the nearest shuttle, Dr. Singh intercepted them, brandishing a sample collection kit. "Wait, I need blood samples from both of you," she insisted, her eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. Thomas opened his mouth to protest, but Xena was already extending one of her arms. "Quickly," she urged, her melodic voice tinged with urgency. Singh worked with practiced efficiency, drawing blood from both Thomas and Xena before they boarded the shuttle. As the hatch sealed behind them, she clutched the precious vials to her chest, mind racing with possibilities. The evacuation fleet lifted off, weaving through a hail of Zorn fire. From his seat, Thomas watched the battle unfold through the shuttle's viewport. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers in the sky as human fighters engaged the Zorn attackers. Beside him, Xena monitored his vital signs, her four eyes darting between Thomas and her medical equipment. The soft glow where their skin touched persisted, pulsing gently with each of Thomas's heartbeats. A violent shudder ran through the shuttle. Warning klaxons blared as the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're hit! Losing altitude!" Thomas's stomach lurched as the shuttle plummeted. Xena's arms wrapped protectively around him as they spiraled towards the dense jungle canopy of Novus Prime below. The last thing Thomas saw before impact was the worried expression in Xena's alien eyes. He awoke to the scent of unfamiliar flora and the distant cries of alien fauna. Thomas blinked, his vision swimming into focus. He lay on a bed of soft purple fronds, sheltered beneath the twisted wreckage of the shuttle. "You're awake," Xena's voice came from nearby. She knelt beside him, applying a silvery salve to a gash on his arm. The others didn't survive the crash. Thomas winced, both from the news and a sharp pain in his ribs. "Where are we?" "Novus Prime," Xena replied, her lower set of hands adjusting a makeshift splint on Thomas's leg. "A neutral world, uninhabited by sentience, but teeming with life." As if to emphasize her point, a piercing shriek echoed through the jungle, sending a shiver down Thomas's spine. He tried to sit up, but Xena gently pressed him back down. "Rest," she insisted. "Your injuries were severe. I've done what I can, but—" She trailed off, her gaze drawn to where her hand rested on Thomas's chest. The glow had intensified, spreading in web-like patterns across his skin. Thomas felt a tingling warmth suffuse his body, and with it came something else. A flash of emotion that wasn't his own. Concern, curiosity, fear. "Xena," he whispered, "what's happening to us?" Before she could answer, a low growl rumbled from the underbrush. Xena's head snapped up, all four eyes scanning their surroundings. "We're not safe here," she said, helping Thomas to his feet. "Can you walk?" Thomas nodded, gritting his teeth against the pain. As they moved deeper into the jungle, he found himself leaning less on Xena with each step. Whatever was happening between them seemed to be accelerating his healing. As they navigated the alien terrain, Thomas's military training kicked in. He cataloged potential threats and resources, while Xena identified which plants and fungi might be safe for consumption. Their combined knowledge gave them a fighting chance in this hostile environment. Days passed in a blur of survival challenges. They narrowly escaped the jaws of a six-legged predator, its iridescent scales reminiscent of Xena's own. They found shelter from acidic rainstorms in the hollowed-out trunk of a massive tree-like organism. Through it all, the connection between them grew stronger. Thomas began to experience flashes of Xena's memories, the rigorous training of a Rakari medic, the weight of her people's taboos, the wonder of her first deep space mission. In turn, Xena caught glimpses of Thomas's life, his childhood on a crowded Earth, the camaraderie of basic training, the horrors of his first battle against the Zorn. As they huddled together one night, the bioluminescent flora of Novus Prime casting a soft glow around them, Thomas voiced the question that had been nagging at him. "Xena, why did you save me? You broke your people's most sacred law." Xena was quiet for a long moment, her lower arms absently tracing patterns in the soil. "Because it was right," she finally said. "Because a life is a life, regardless of species. And because—" She hesitated, her upper right hand reaching out to touch Thomas's cheek. "I sensed something in you, something that made me question everything I'd been taught about humans." Thomas leaned into her touch, the now familiar glow spreading between them. He was about to respond when a rustling in the undergrowth made them both freeze. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, spindly, with bioluminescent markings swirling across its bark-like skin. It raised a crude spear, chittering in a language neither Thomas nor Xena understood. More figures appeared surrounding them. The natives of Novus Prime had found them at last. Thomas and Xena stood back to back, facing the alien hostility that encircled them. Their minds raced in unison, searching for a way to communicate, to survive this new threat. As the natives closed in, Thomas felt Xena's commitment mirroring his own. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Thomas and Xena tensed, their eyes darting between the spear-wielding natives surrounding them. The chittering grew louder, more insistent. Thomas felt a sudden surge of perseverance course through him, accompanied by a flicker of an alien emotion he recognized as Xena's. Without speaking, they moved in perfect synchronization. Thomas dropped low, sweeping the legs of the nearest native, while Xena used her forearms to disarm two others. The natives, caught off guard by their coordinated assault, stumbled back. "We mean no harm," Xena called out, her melodic voice adopting a soothing tone. She raised her upper hands in a gesture of peace while her lower hands supported Thomas as he regained his footing. Thomas noticed something odd. The pain in his ribs had subsided, and his movements felt more fluid, more powerful than before. He locked eyes with Xena, seeing his own confusion mirrored in her four-eyed gaze. A rustling in the undergrowth interrupted their silent communication. A massive shape burst from the foliage, all scales and teeth and razor-sharp claws. The natives scattered, their chittering turning to shrieks of terror. The six-legged predator, easily twice the size of an earth grizzly bear, fixed its hungry gaze on Thomas and Xena. Its scales shimmered with an iridescence reminiscent of Xena's own, but there was nothing beautiful about the venom dripping from its fangs. "Run," Thomas suggested, already backing away. Xena shook her head. "It's faster than us. We fight." As the beast lunged, Thomas and Xena sprang into action. Thomas ducked under a swipe of its claws, feeling the rush of air above his head. He grabbed a fallen branch, wielding it like a club. Xena, meanwhile, darted around to the creature's flank, her forearms working in concert to pelt it with rocks. The predator roared in frustration, spinning to face Xena. Thomas saw his opening and charged, bringing his makeshift weapon down on the creature's hindquarters with all his strength. The branch shattered, but to Thomas's amazement, the beast stumbled, its thick hide actually dented by the blow. Xena capitalized on the creature's momentary disorientation. She leapt onto its back, her strong arms locked around its neck. The predator bucked and thrashed, trying to dislodge her. Thomas watched in awe as Xena held on, her body seeming to heal instantly from the scratches inflicted by the creature's scales. "Thomas!" Xena called out. "Its eyes!" Understanding flashed between them. Thomas scooped up a handful of loose soil and flung it at the predator's face. It reared back, momentarily blinded. In that instant, Xena released her hold and dropped to the ground. She and Thomas retreated swiftly, putting distance between themselves and the disoriented beast. They ran through the dense jungle, the sounds of the predator's frustrated roars fading behind them. Only when they were certain they weren't being pursued did they stop to catch their breath. "That was," Thomas panted, "incredible. How did we do that?" Xena examined her arms, watching as the last of her scratches faded away. "Our bodies are changing," she observed. "The biochemical reaction between us, it's intensifying." Thomas flexed his muscles, marveling at the newfound strength coursing through him. "We need to find a way off this planet," he said. "Whatever's happening to us, it could be the key to ending this war." They pressed on through the jungle, their heightened abilities making the treacherous terrain easier to navigate. As they walked, Thomas found himself increasingly aware of Xena's presence, not just physically, but emotionally. He could sense her willpower, her curiosity, and underneath it all, a growing affection that mirrored his own. The dense foliage suddenly gave way to a clearing. Before them stood a structure unlike anything they had seen before. Smooth, dark stone rose in spiraling towers, covered in intricate glyphs that glowed with a faint, pulsing light. "What is this place?" Thomas breathed, awestruck. Xena shook her head. "It's not Rakari architecture, and certainly not human. These ruins must predate both our civilizations." They approached cautiously, scanning for any signs of danger. The entrance to the structure loomed before them, a gaping maw of shadows and secrets. As they stepped inside, lights flickered to life along the walls, responding to their presence. The interior was a maze of twisting corridors and vast chambers. In the center of the largest room, they found what appeared to be a control panel, its surface covered in the same glowing glyphs as the exterior. "This might be our way out," Thomas said, examining the alien technology. "If we can figure out how to use it, we might be able to send a distress signal." Xena nodded, her four eyes darting over the symbols. Some of these patterns, they're similar to ancient Rakari texts. I might be able to decipher enough to... A distant boom cut her off. The ground trembled beneath their feet. That wasn't natural, Thomas said, his soldier's instincts kicking in. Sounds like a ship entering the atmosphere. They rushed to a window, peering out at the jungle canopy. In the distance, they could see a plume of smoke rising above the trees. The sleek, predatory shape of a Zorn scout ship hovered near the crash site. They must have tracked the shuttle, Xena whispered, Thomas's fist tight. We need to move, fast. They turned back to the control panel, working frantically to unlock its secrets. As Xena's fingers danced over the glyphs, Thomas kept watch, his enhanced senses straining for any sign of approaching danger. A sound caught his attention, the faint whine of Zorn energy weapons powering up. They're close, he warned. Xena's hands moved faster, her brow furrowed in concentration. Suddenly, the panel came to life, holographic displays springing into existence above it. I've done it, she exclaimed. I think I can send a... The far wall exploded inward, showering them with debris. Through the dust and smoke, the menacing forms of Zorn soldiers emerged, their weapons trained on Thomas and Xena. Well, well, the lead Zorn sneered, his insectoid mandibles clicking. What have we here? A human and a Rakari working together? How disgusting. Thomas and Xena stood back to back, their minds racing in unison, searching for a way out of this new predicament. As the Zorn closed in, the bond between them pulsed with shared drive. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Together. As the Zorn soldiers advanced, weapons trained on them, a sudden pulse of energy erupted from the ancient control panel. A shimmering field enveloped Thomas and Xena, causing the Zorn's energy blast to dissipate harmlessly against it. The lead Zorn snarled in frustration, mandibles clicking furiously. Impossible! What trickery is this? Thomas and Xena exchanged a quick glance, their minds racing in unison. They knew the protective field wouldn't last forever. As if reading each other's thoughts, they sprang into action. Xena's forearms moved with lightning speed over the control panel, inputting a complex sequence of glyphs. Thomas, meanwhile, scanned the room for anything they could use. His enhanced vision spotted a small opening in the far wall, partially hidden behind a fallen pillar. Xena, he whispered, not wanting the Zorn to overhear. There's a passage, 2 o'clock behind the debris. She nodded almost imperceptibly, her fingers still dancing over the alien technology. Suddenly, the holographic displays flickered and died. The energy field surrounding them began to fade. Now! Thomas shouted. As the protective barrier dissipated, Xena snatched up a handful of small, glowing crystals from the control panel. Thomas grabbed her arm, and together they sprinted for the hidden passage. The Zorn, momentarily stunned by the field's collapse, recovered quickly and opened fire. Energy bolts sizzled past them as they dove through the opening. Thomas felt the heat of a near miss scorch his back, but the pain faded almost instantly. Their healing abilities were growing stronger. The passage led them through a maze of twisting corridors. Behind them, they could hear the angry chittering of the Zorn in pursuit. As they ran, Thomas noticed something odd. He could sense Xena's presence in his mind, her thoughts and emotions becoming clearer with each passing moment. Left, Xena's voice echoed in his head, though her lips hadn't moved. Thomas didn't question it. He veered left, pulling Xena with him just as a section of the ceiling collapsed where they had been standing. They emerged into the jungle, the lush foliage providing immediate cover. Without breaking stride, they plunged into the dense undergrowth. Their enhanced abilities allowed them to move swiftly and silently through the alien terrain. Vines and branches seemed to part before them, as if the jungle itself was aiding their escape. As they put distance between themselves and the Zorn, Thomas marveled at their newfound connection. He could feel Xena's commitment, her quick analytical mind assessing their options. In turn, she sensed his tactical awareness, his instincts guiding their path through the treacherous landscape. They paused briefly at the edge of a steep ravine, the sound of rushing water echoing from below. Xena produced the crystals she had taken from the ruins, examining them closely. These might be power sources, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. If we can find a way to utilize them, we might be able to send a distress signal. Thomas nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. In the distance, he could make out the faint outline of a mountain range. We should head for higher ground, he suggested. It'll give us a better vantage point and might improve our chances of broadcasting a signal. As they prepared to continue their journey, a rustling in the nearby foliage caught their attention. Thomas tensed, ready for another Zorn attack. Instead, a group of strange, luminescent beings emerged from the jungle. The creatures were tall and slender, with bark-like skin covered in swirling, bioluminescent patterns. Their eyes were large and dark, reflecting the vibrant colors of the surrounding flora. One of them stepped forward, raising a hand in what seemed to be a gesture of peace. "Greetings, off-worlders," the being said, its voice a melodious whisper that seemed to resonate with the very air around them. "I am Zix, an elder of the Zelarians. We have been observing you since your arrival on Novus Prime." Thomas and Xena exchanged a surprised glance. These beings were clearly far more advanced than they had initially assumed. Zix's gaze lingered on the space between Thomas and Xena, where the faint glow of their biochemical bond pulsed softly. "The connection between you is intriguing. It bears similarities to our own biotechnology." Before Thomas or Xena could respond, the distant sound of Zorn energy weapons echoed through the jungle. Zix's expression hardened. "Come," the Zelarian elder said, gesturing for them to follow. "We offer you sanctuary in our hidden city of Lumina. There we can discuss your unique bond and the role it may play in the greater conflicts that plague the stars." With the Zorn closing in and few other options, Thomas and Xena nodded in agreement. As they followed the Zelarians deeper into the jungle, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of something monumental. The secrets of Novus Prime and the hidden Zelarian civilization might hold the key to changing the course of the war and the future of human-Rakhari relations. Yet as they pressed on, guided by their new allies, Thomas and Xena remained acutely aware of the dangers that pursued them. The Zorn were still out there, and now that they had discovered the presence of the Zelarians, the stakes had grown even higher. Their journey was nowhere near the end, and the challenges ahead would test not only their newfound abilities, but also the strength of the bond that had formed between them. Them and their evolving connection had become central to a conflict far greater than they could have imagined. As they followed the Zelarians through the dense jungle, Thomas and Xena remained acutely aware of the Zorn's pursuit. The distant sound of energy weapons and the occasional tremor beneath their feet served as constant reminders of the danger at their heels. Zix led them to a hidden entrance concealed by a shimmering energy field that resembled a waterfall. As they passed through it, the jungle gave way to a breathtaking sight. The hidden city of Lumina sprawled before them, a marvel of bioorganic architecture. Crystalline spires pulsed with soft, bioluminescent light, while bridges of living vines connected floating platforms high above the ground. Thomas and Xena had little time to marvel at the wonders around them. Zix ushered them into a central chamber where other Zelarian elders had gathered. The air thrummed with tension as holographic displays flickered to life, showing the approaching Zorn forces. "We must decide quickly," Zix said, their melodious voice tinged with urgency. "Our defenses can repel the Zorn, but at what cost, and for how long?" Thomas and Xena exchanged a glance, their newly formed telepathic bond allowing them to communicate without words. They both recognized the gravity of the situation and the potential consequences of their next move. "We need to reveal Lumina," Thomas said, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. Xena nodded in agreement. "The Zelarians' advanced technology, combined with our unique bond, could be the key to ending this war. We can't keep it hidden any longer." The Zelarian elders murmured among themselves, their bioluminescent patterns flashing in what seemed to be agitation. Zix turned to Thomas and Xena, their large eyes filled with concern. "You understand the risk you're asking us to take? We have remained hidden for millennia to avoid the very conflicts that now threaten to engulf us." "We do," Xena replied, her four eyes meeting Zix's gaze. "But sometimes, to preserve peace, we must be willing to act." After a tense moment, Zix nodded. "Very well. We will partially reveal Lumina, maintaining some of our defenses. May your wisdom prove true." As the Zelarians began the process of lowering their cloaking technology, Alarms blared throughout the city. Thomas and Xena moved to a large viewing platform, watching as the jungle canopy above them seemed to dissolve, revealing the true expanse of Lumina to the sky above. Almost immediately, a sleek human ship broke through the atmosphere, followed closely by a larger vessel of Rakari design. Thomas recognized the markings on the human ship. It was Captain Rodriguez's rescue team. As the ships drew closer, Thomas and Xena stepped out onto an open landing platform. The bond between them pulsed visibly, surrounding their bodies with a soft, ethereal glow. They stood side by side, a living symbol of human Rakari cooperation, as the ships touched down. Captain Rodriguez was the first to emerge, her eyes widening at the sight of Thomas and Xena. She was followed by Colonel Harris and Ambassador Zara, their expressions a mix of shock and awe as they took in the revealed city and the transformed pair before them. "Thomas," Rodriguez called out, her hand instinctively moving to her weapon. "What's going on here?" Before Thomas could respond, a thunderous boom shook the air. Looking up, they saw a massive Zorn battle fleet emerging from hyperspace, its weapons already charging. A harsh, guttural voice crackled over all communication channels. "This is General Vex of the Zorn Empire. Surrender the planet and all parties involved, or face annihilation. We have brought a weapon that will end this war once and for all." As the assembled leaders turned to each other in alarm, Thomas and Xena stepped forward. Their minds worked in perfect synchronization, a plan forming between them. "We have a way to neutralize their weapon," Thomas announced, his voice carrying a newfound authority. Xena continued seamlessly. "But we'll need your trust and cooperation. All of you." Colonel Harris frowned, his military training warring with the unprecedented situation before him. "And why should we trust you? Look at yourselves. What have you become?" Ambassador Zara placed a calming hand on Harris's arm. "Perhaps the question we should be asking is not what they have become, but what they can help us achieve." As the group debated, Zix approached with a small contingent of Zalarian scientists. "We have a vessel that can amplify their energy field," the elder explained. "If what they propose is possible, this ship will allow them to project their power over a vast distance." Captain Rodriguez, who had been silently assessing the situation, finally spoke up. "I've seen what Thomas is capable of. If there's even a chance this could work, we have to try." With tensions mounting and time running short, the leaders reached a tentative agreement. As Thomas and Xena prepared to board the Zalarian vessel, Dr. Alara Singh, who had arrived with the Joint Task Force, approached them. "Whatever's happening to you two," she said, her eyes alight with scientific curiosity, "it could be the breakthrough we've been looking for. While you're up there, we'll be working on a way to replicate and stabilize this effect." Thomas nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He turned to Xena, seeing his own commitment reflected in her 4 eyes. As they boarded the sleek, organic ship, their bond hummed with shared purpose and something deeper, a connection that had grown far beyond their initial encounter on the battlefield. The ship's canopy sealed around them, its controls responding to their thoughts as much as their physical inputs. As they rose into the sky, leaving the relative safety of Lumina behind, Thomas and Xena prepared to face the Zorn fleet and the unknown consequences of their actions. The fate of not just 2 species, but potentially the entire galaxy, now rested in their hands. Hands. The fate of not just 2 species, but potentially the entire galaxy, now rested in their grasp. As the Zalarian ship ascended through the atmosphere, Thomas and Xena's minds worked in perfect synchronization. They could sense the approaching Zorn fleet, a massive collection of warships that dwarfed anything they had encountered before. General Vex's voice boomed across all communication channels once more. "This is your final warning. Surrender now or face obliteration." Thomas and Xena exchanged a determined look. Without a word, they directed their ship towards the heart of the Zorn fleet. The Zalarian vessel responded to their thoughts, weaving through a barrage of energy blasts with impossible agility. As they neared the Zorn flagship, Thomas and Xena focused their combined power. A shimmering field of energy expanded from their ship, engulfing the entire Zorn fleet. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, in a blinding flash of light, the Zorn ship's weapons systems went dark. The fleet hung motionless in space, disabled by the unprecedented display of power. Back on Novus Prime, the assembled leaders watched in awe as Thomas and Xena single-handedly neutralized the Zorn threat. The victory was swift and decisive, but it left everyone with more questions than answers. As Thomas and Xena's ship touched down in Lumina, they were met with a mixture of celebration and apprehension. Captain Rodriguez approached them first, her expression a mix of relief and concern. "That was incredible," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But what exactly did you do up there?" Before Thomas or Xena could respond, Colonel Harris stepped forward, his face set in a grim expression. "Whatever it was, we need to replicate it, immediately." The gathering quickly devolved into heated debate. Human and Rakari delegates argued over the potential applications of Thomas and Xena's newfound abilities, while the Zalarian elders urged caution. Amidst the chaos, Dr. Alara Singh approached Thomas and Xena. Her eyes gleamed with scientific curiosity as she examined the faint glow still emanating from their bodies. "I think I might be able to replicate your bond," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "But I'll need to run some tests." As the arguments intensified around them, Thomas felt a sudden wave of exhaustion wash over him. He glanced at Xena, seeing his own fatigue mirrored in her 4 eyes. Zix, noticing their condition, intervened. "Enough!" The Zalarian elder's melodious voice cut through the din. "Our guests need rest. We will reconvene when they have recovered." As Thomas and Xena were led to a quiet chamber to recuperate, neither of them could shake the feeling that their actions had set in motion events far beyond their control. Days passed in a blur of tests and debates. Dr. Singh worked tirelessly to understand the nature of Thomas and Xena's bond, while the Alliance leaders argued over the future of their cooperation. Finally, Dr. Singh emerged from her makeshift lab, her face flushed with triumph. "I've done it," she announced to the gathered leaders. "I've developed a serum that could potentially grant abilities similar to Thomas and Xena's." The room erupted into chaos once more. Colonel Harris immediately demanded the serum be distributed to human and Rakari forces. Ambassador Zara argued for caution, while the Zellarian elders warned of unforeseen consequences. In the midst of the uproar, Thomas and Xena stepped forward. "We'll do it," Thomas said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We'll be the first to test the refined serum." A hush fell over the room as Dr. Singh prepared the injections. Thomas and Xena stood side by side, their hands intertwined as the serum was administered. The effect was immediate and staggering. Thomas felt his strength surge, his senses sharpening beyond anything he had experienced before. Beside him, Xena's skin rippled with newfound regenerative power. But it was their mental connection that truly astonished them. Suddenly, they could sense each other's thoughts with crystal clarity, even from opposite ends of the room. As the gathered leaders marveled at the transformation, alarms blared throughout Lumina. A faint distress signal had been detected at the edge of the solar system. Without hesitation, Thomas and Xena moved towards the hangar where their Zellarian ship waited. They could sense the signal's source, a damaged Zorn scout ship carrying vital information about a greater threat. "Wait," Captain Rodriguez called after them. "We need to form a plan to—" But Thomas and Xena were already gone, their enhanced abilities allowing them to commandeer the ship and launch into space before anyone could stop them. As they approached the source of the distress signal, a chilling sight greeted them. A massive vortex of dark energy swirled in space, slowly consuming the Zorn scout ship. Thomas and Xena focused their combined powers, establishing a tractor beam to pull the Zorn ship free. As they struggled against the vortex's pull, fragmented telepathic impressions flooded their minds. Images of an ancient, terrifying species flashed before them. The Void Architects, a name that sent shivers down their spines. They saw glimpses of a grand, sinister plan, manipulating the conflicts between known races for an unknown purpose. With a final surge of effort, they wrenched the Zorn ship free from the vortex's grasp. As they prepared to dock and rescue any survivors, a massive, otherworldly structure began to materialize at the edge of the vortex. Thomas and Xena stared in awe and terror at the emerging threat, realizing that their actions had alerted the Void Architects to their presence. As the structure continued to take shape, They knew that the true battle for the hope of the universe was only just beginning. As the structure continued to take shape, they knew that the true battle for the hope of the universe was only just starting. Thomas and Xena exchanged a determined look, their enhanced senses allowing them to communicate without words. They maneuvered their Xelarian ship closer to the damaged Zorn scout vessel, keenly aware of the looming threat behind them. "We need to get them out of there," Thomas said, his voice tight with urgency. Xena nodded, her four eyes scanning the Zorn ship's hull for an entry point. "There," she pointed, indicating a partially intact airlock. As they approached, Thomas felt a surge of strength coursing through his body. Without hesitation, he moved towards the airlock, his movements fluid and precise. Xena remained at the controls, her skin rippling with an otherworldly energy as she focused on maintaining their ship's stability. Thomas crossed the short distance between the ships, his enhanced agility allowing him to navigate the void with ease. He reached the Zorn vessel and quickly bypassed the airlock's security measures, a feat that would have been impossible before his transformation. Inside, the scout ship was a maze of twisted metal and flickering emergency lights. Thomas moved swiftly through the corridors, his heightened senses guiding him towards the faint life signs he detected. "I've found survivors," he communicated telepathically to Xena, "but the life support systems are failing." Xena's response came instantly, her thoughts merging seamlessly with his. "I'm on it." Thomas felt a surge of energy through their bond as Xena channeled her regenerative abilities into the Zorn ship's systems. The flickering lights stabilized, and the thin atmosphere began to thicken. Pushing deeper into the ship, Thomas reached the bridge. There, slumped over a control panel, was a grizzled Zorn warrior. The alien scales were scorched, and dark blood oozed from multiple wounds. "It's over," the Zorn captain growled, his voice weak but defiant. "Finish it, human." Thomas approached slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to fight, Captain. I'm here to save you." The Zorn's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed with suspicion. "Save us? After what we've done?" "There's a greater threat out there," Thomas explained, gesturing towards the viewport where the Void Architect's structure loomed. "We need to work together now." The Zorn captain, Croc, hesitated for a moment before nodding grudgingly. "Very well, human. But know this, our cooperation is born of necessity, not trust." As Thomas helped Croc to his feet, a violent tremor shook the ship. Through their telepathic link, Thomas sensed Xena's alarm. "Thomas, we need to move." Her thoughts raced into his mind. "The Void Architect's structure is emitting energy pulses. It's trying to pull us in." Thomas slung Croc's arm over his shoulder, supporting the injured Zorn as they made their way back through the ship. They collected the few other survivors they encountered, a ragtag group of battered Zorn warriors who eyed Thomas with a mixture of fear and curiosity. As they reached the airlock, Thomas saw their Xelarian ship hovering just beyond, surrounded by a shimmering field of energy. Xena stood at the open hatch, her body glowing with an intense light as she maintained the protective barrier. "Jump!" she called out, her voice carrying across the void. Thomas didn't hesitate. With strength he didn't know he possessed, he launched himself and Croc across the gap between the ships. The other Zorn followed, their instinct for survival overcoming their distrust of their former enemies. As soon as the last Zorn warrior was aboard, Xena sealed the hatch. The ship's interior hummed with energy as Thomas and Xena combined their powers, reinforcing the protective field around their vessel. "We need to break free," Thomas said, his hands flying over the ship's controls. Xena nodded, her four eyes focused intently on the swirling vortex of dark energy that threatened to engulf them. "On my mark," she said. They waited, tensed, as the pull of the Void Architect's structure grew stronger. The ship groaned under the strain, the Xelarian technology pushed to its limits. "Now!" Xena shouted. As one, Thomas and Xena poured their combined power into the ship's propulsion system. The vessel lurched forward, straining against the gravitational pull of the vortex. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed they would be drawn in. Then, with a final surge of energy, they broke free. The ship shot forward, leaving the Void Architect's structure behind. As they sped away, Thomas and Xena maintained their focus, collecting valuable data on the dark energy vortex and the alien construct. In the distance, they spotted another ship approaching. Captain Rodriguez's vessel, carrying their human, Rakari, and Zalarian allies. As the two ships drew near each other, Thomas and Xena finally allowed themselves to relax. But their relief was short-lived. A wave of dizziness washed over Thomas, and he stumbled, catching himself on the control panel. Beside him, Xena swayed, her usually vibrant skin taking on a sickly pallor. "Thomas," she gasped, reaching out to steady herself. "Something's wrong." As they looked at each other, the glow of their bond flickered erratically. The power that had allowed them to perform such incredible feats was now threatening to tear them apart. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm system. "Thomas, Xena, what's your status?" Thomas opened his mouth to respond, but another wave of weakness hit him. He felt Xena's concern through their bond, mingled with her own pain. "We need help," Xena managed to say, her voice strained. "Something's happening to our bond." As the two ships began their journey back to Novus Prime, Thomas and Xena clung to each other, their once stable bond now a maelstrom of conflicting energies. They had saved the Zorn survivors and gathered crucial intelligence about the Void Architects, but at what cost to themselves? In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Ilara Singh worked feverishly, her face a mask of concentration as she analyzed the data from Thomas and Xena's latest scans. The rescued Zorn watched warily from the corner, their own injuries momentarily forgotten in the face of this new development. As Novus Prime grew larger in the view screen, Thomas and Xena knew that the challenges they faced were just the beginning. The fate of their bond, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. But for now, they drew strength from each other, their fingers intertwined as they prepared to face whatever came next. As the ships docked at Novus Prime, Thomas and Xena were rushed to the medical bay, their bodies racked with tremors from their unstable bond. Dr. Singh worked tirelessly, her fingers flying over holographic displays as she analyzed their condition. "We need to address the Alliance immediately," Thomas gasped, struggling to sit up. "The Void Architects—" "Your health comes first," Dr. Singh said firmly, pushing him back down. "I've stabilized your condition temporarily, but we need a more permanent solution." Despite Dr. Singh's protests, Thomas and Xena insisted on speaking to the assembled delegates. Leaning on each other for support, they made their way to the grand conference chamber. The room fell silent as they entered. Colonel Harris, Ambassador Zara, and the Zalarian Elder Zix sat at the head of the table, their faces etched with concern. Captain Croc, the rescued Zorn commander, stood off to the side, his scaled arms crossed over his chest. Thomas opened his mouth to speak, but a wave of dizziness washed over him. He swayed, his vision blurring. "The Void Architects," Xena began, her voice strained. "They're a threat beyond anything we've—" Suddenly, Dr. Singh burst into the room, a hypospray in her hand. "Stop!" she shouted. "Their condition is critical. I need to administer this stabilizing agent immediately." Without waiting for a response, she pressed the hypospray to Thomas's neck, then Xena's. The effect was instantaneous. The tremors subsided and clarity returned to their eyes. But something else happened, something unexpected. Thomas gasped as a flood of memories that weren't his own rushed into his mind. He saw Xena's childhood on Rakhar, felt her excitement at her first scientific discovery, experienced her wonder at seeing Earth for the first time. Beside him, Xena's 4 eyes widened in surprise. "Thomas," she whispered, "I can see everything, your training, your fears, your hopes." Dr. Singh watched them intently, her brow furrowed. "Fascinating," she murmured. "It seems the stabilizing agent has caused a merging of your consciousnesses." The room erupted into chatter, but Thomas and Xena barely noticed. They were lost in each other's minds, centuries of combined knowledge and experience flowing between them. After a moment, they turned to face the assembled delegates, their eyes shining with newfound understanding. "We have a plan," they said in unison. Over the next hour, Thomas and Xena laid out a comprehensive strategy to combat the Void Architects. They proposed the formation of an elite task force, enhanced with Dr. Singh's serum, to infiltrate Void Architect territory. "With our combined knowledge," Thomas explained, We can train this team to understand and potentially sabotage their harvesting technology. And with the enhancements from the serum, Xena added, they'll have the physical capabilities to match the Void Architect's advanced biology. The Alliance leaders listened intently, their expressions a mix of hope and skepticism. Colonel Harris leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. And who would lead this task force? Before Thomas or Xena could respond, Captain Croc stepped forward. I volunteer, he said, his gravelly voice echoing through the chamber. My people have encountered the Void Architects before. We know their weaknesses. Ambassador Zara's antennae twitched in surprise. You would work alongside your former enemies, Zorn. Croc's scaled face twisted into what might have been a smile. The Void Architects are a threat to us all. Old enmities must be set aside. As the discussion continued, Thomas felt a sharp pain lance through his head. Beside him, Xena stumbled, her skin taking on a sickly hue. Dr. Singh rushed to their side, her medical scanner whirring. The merging of your minds is putting too much strain on your bodies, she said urgently. We need a more permanent solution. The doctor turned to address the Alliance leaders. I propose a radical procedure, she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of her words. We could genetically merge Thomas and Xena at a cellular level, creating a new hybrid species. It's the only way to stabilize their condition long-term. A hush fell over the room as the implications of Dr. Singh's proposal sank in. Ambassador Zara was the first to speak. The ethical implications of such a procedure? Her words were cut off by a blaring alarm. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. We've detected a fleet of Void Architect scout ships at the edge of the system. They'll reach Novus Prime within hours. The room erupted into chaos. Colonel Harris began barking orders, while the Zalarian elders huddled together, their bioluminescent skin pulsing with anxiety. In the midst of the commotion, Thomas and Xena exchanged a look. No words were needed. They could feel each other's perseverance through their bond. We'll do it, Thomas announced, his voice cutting through the noise. We'll undergo the procedure. Xena nodded, her four eyes fixed on Dr. Singh. Our hybrid form might be the key to defeating the Void Architects. As the Alliance scrambled to prepare their defenses, Thomas and Xena were rushed to a Zalarian medical facility. The last thing they saw before entering the operating chamber was Captain Rodriguez leading a team of enhanced volunteers, human, Rakari, Zalarian, and Zorn, towards the hangar bay. Inside the chamber, Thomas reached out and took Xena's hand. Their fingers intertwined, a physical manifestation of the bond that was about to become permanent. Are you ready? Dr. Singh asked, her hand hovering over the activation switch. Thomas and Xena looked at each other one last time, as separate beings. We're ready, they said together. As the procedure began, their vision blurred. Images flashed before their eyes, glimpses of Void Architect technology, strategies for counterattacks, possibilities for the future. Their bodies began to change, cells merging and reforming. In the distance, they could hear the sound of ships launching, Captain Rodriguez and her team racing to meet the Void Architect scouts head-on. The fate of Novus Prime, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. As Thomas and Xena's separate consciousnesses began to fade, merging into something new and unprecedented, a single thought echoed through their shared mind. The real battle was just beginning. Beginning. The process was unlike anything they had ever experienced before. As Thomas and Xena's consciousnesses merged, their physical forms began to shift and change. Dr. Singh monitored their vital signs closely, her face a mask of concentration as she adjusted the parameters of the procedure. In the distance, the sounds of battle echoed through the facility. Captain Elena Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom, reporting on the engagement with the Void Architect scout ships. The enhanced crew is performing beyond expectations, she announced. We're holding the line, but more enemy ships are incoming. Inside the medical pod, Thomas and Xena's bodies glowed with an intense light. Their cells reorganized, human and Rakari DNA intertwining in ways never before seen. The energy buildup reached a critical point, and suddenly, a massive surge pulsed through the facility. Lights flickered and equipment shut down momentarily. Dr. Singh shielded her eyes from the blinding flash emanating from the pod. As the glow faded, she approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of steam. A figure emerged, stepping gracefully onto the floor. Dr. Singh gasped as she beheld the being before her, neither Thomas nor Xena, but something entirely new. The hybrid entity stood tall, its skin shimmering with a metallic sheen. 4 eyes, 2 human, 2 Rakari, blinked in unison, taking in the surroundings with enhanced clarity. The being's features were a perfect blend of both species, creating a visage of otherworldly beauty. "How do you feel?" Dr. Singh asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The being tilted its head, considering the question. When it spoke, its voice was a harmonious blend of Thomas and Xena's. "We are whole. We are Thexina." Before Dr. Singh could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Colonel Harris's voice boomed over the intercom. "The Void Architects have broken through. We need all available personnel to report to their stations immediately." Thexina's 4 eyes narrowed in persistence. "We must go. Our knowledge, our abilities, they are needed in this fight." Dr. Singh nodded, still in awe of the being before her. "Of course, but first, we need to run some quick tests to ensure your stability." As Dr. Singh conducted her scans, Thexina interfaced with the facility's computer systems, absorbing information at an astounding rate. Within minutes, they had formulated a strategy that combined the best aspects of all allied species' tactics. "We have a plan," Thexina announced, "but we'll need a ship and a team." They made their way to the command center, where the Alliance leaders were gathered around a holographic display of the battle. All eyes turned to Thexina as they entered, a mixture of shock and hope on their faces. Colonel Harris was the first to recover. Are you—" "We are Thexina," the hybrid being replied, "and we have a way to stop the Void Architects." As Thexina outlined their plan, Captain Croc stepped forward. "I will join you," the Zorn commander declared. "My knowledge of the enemy will be valuable." A team was quickly assembled, a mix of enhanced humans, Rakari, Zalarians, and Zorn. They boarded a modified Zalarian ship, its systems specially calibrated to interface with Thexina's unique biology. As they prepared for launch, Dr. Singh approached Thexina one last time. "Be careful out there," she said. "We still don't fully understand the extent of your abilities." Thexina nodded, their 4 eyes filled with a depth of understanding that transcended their former selves. "We will be cautious, Doctor, and we will return with the knowledge needed to save us all." The ship's engines hummed to life, and Thexina took their place at the helm. As they guided the vessel out of the hangar, the vast expanse of space opened up before them. The battle raged in the distance, flashes of energy weapons and explosions painting the void. Thexina's mind raced, processing tactical information and coordinating with the fleet. They activated the ship's cloaking device, a shimmering field of energy enveloping the vessel. As they approached the massive Void Architect command ship, Thexina felt a sudden, overwhelming psychic connection. Images flooded their mind, vast, incomprehensible structures, civilizations consumed, and a hunger that spanned galaxies. The hybrid being gasped, momentarily losing control of their powers. A pulse of energy radiated from their body, interfering with the ship's systems and alerting the Void Architects to their presence. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as a powerful tractor beam locked onto their ship. Captain Croc growled, his clawed hands flying over the controls. "We're trapped." Thexina forced themselves to focus, pushing aside the lingering echoes of the psychic connection. "All power to the shields," they commanded. "Prepare for emergency maneuvers." As the ship shuddered under the strain of the tractor beam, Thexina closed their eyes, reaching out with their enhanced senses. They could feel the energy patterns of the Void Architect technology, complex and alien, yet somehow familiar. "There," Thexina said, their eyes snapping open. "A weakness in their defenses. If we can overload their tractor beam emitter, we might be able to break free." The hybrid being's hands danced across the control panel, redirecting power and reconfiguring the ship's energy output. The vessel groaned under the stress, but Thexina pressed on, their merged consciousness allowing them to push the technology to its limits. Suddenly, A burst of energy erupted from the ship, colliding with the tractor beam emitter. The Void Architect vessel shuddered, and for a moment the pull of the beam weakened. "Now!" Thexina shouted. "Full power to engines!" The ship lurched forward, straining against the weakened tractor beam. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed they might still be trapped. Then, with a final surge of power, they broke free. Alarms blared as the Void Architect command ship launched waves of smaller attack vessels. Thexina's team found themselves in the heart of the enemy fleet, their mission to infiltrate the command ship now significantly more complicated. As they weaved through the onslaught of enemy fire, Thexina's mind raced with possibilities. The glimpse they had seen into the Void Architect's civilization had shaken them to their core, but it had also provided valuable insights. "We need to find a way to disrupt their harvesting technology," Thexina announced, their voice steady despite the chaos around them. "If we can do that, we might be able to turn the tide of this battle." Captain Croc nodded grimly. "Agreed. But first, we need to survive this swarm." As the ship rolled to avoid another barrage of energy weapons, Thexina felt a new power stirring within them. It was as if their merged consciousness was unlocking abilities neither Thomas nor Xena had possessed individually. Placing their hands on the ship's control panel, Thexina closed their eyes and concentrated. Energy flowed from their body into the ship's systems, enhancing its capabilities beyond their designed limits. The vessel surged forward with newfound speed and agility, outmaneuvering the Void Architect attack ships with ease. Thexina's team watched in awe as their hybrid leader guided them through the chaos, steadily closing in on the massive command ship once more. But as they approached their target, a new threat emerged. The Void Architect command ship began to power up its main weapon, a device capable of rending space-time itself. Thexina's four eyes widened as they realized the implications. If that weapon fired, it wouldn't just destroy the Alliance fleet. It could tear apart the very fabric of reality in this sector of space. With time running out and the fate of not just Novus Prime, but the entire galaxy hanging in the balance, Thexina knew they had to act fast. The true test of their merged abilities was about to begin, and failure was not an option. An option. Thexina's four eyes narrowed, focusing on the control panel before them. The hybrid being's hands flew across the interface, their enhanced mind processing information at an incredible speed. "I have an idea," Thexina announced, their voice a harmonious blend of Thomas and Xena's. "We can use the ship's power core to create an energy pulse strong enough to disrupt their tractor beam." Captain Croc nodded, his reptilian features tense with concentration. "Do it. We don't have much time." Thexina closed their eyes, interfacing directly with the ship's systems. Energy coursed through their body, flowing into the vessel's circuitry. The ship's engines whined as power was redirected to the main capacitors. "Brace yourselves," Thexina warned. A blinding flash erupted from the ship, followed by a shockwave that rippled through space. The tractor beam flickered and died, its hold on their vessel broken. Suddenly free, the ship lurched forward with unexpected velocity. Alarms blared as they hurtled towards the massive bulk of the Void Architect's command vessel. "We're on a collision course," shouted one of the crew members. Thexina's eyes snapped open, all four pupils dilating as they assessed the situation. "No, this is an opportunity. Prepare for emergency docking procedures. We're going to board their ship." Captain Croc barked orders to the crew as Thexina guided their vessel towards a vulnerable section of the command ship's hull. With precision born from their merged consciousness, Thexina maneuvered the ship into position. The impact was jarring, metal screaming against metal as their ship forcibly created an entry point. Emergency force fields activated, preventing explosive decompression as the team prepared to enter the Void Architect's vessel. As they moved through the alien corridors, Thexina's unique physiology allowed them to interface with the ship's systems. Alien symbols and data streams flickered across their vision, gradually becoming comprehensible. "This way," Thexina said, leading the team deeper into the labyrinthine interior. "I can sense the central control hub." As they progressed, Thexina experienced a series of vivid psychic flashes. Images of vast, incomprehensible structures and civilizations consumed by an insatiable hunger flooded their mind. The hybrid being staggered, overwhelmed by the visions. Captain Croc steadied them. "What did you see?" Thexina's voice was barely above a whisper. "The Void Architects. They're not what we thought. They're the result of an ancient civilization's attempt to cheat death. Their life force harvesting technology is a perversion of that goal." This revelation sent a chill through the team, but there was no time to dwell on it. They pressed on, fighting through waves of biomechanical defenders that swarmed to intercept them. Finally, they reached the central control hub. Thexina immediately moved to interface with the core systems, their hands splaying across the alien console. "I can initiate a shutdown sequence," Thexina explained, their voice strained with effort. "It will disable their entire fleet." As Thexina began the process, the ship's automated defenses activated. A shimmering force field sprang up, separating Thexina from the rest of the team. Captain Croc and the others found themselves surrounded by Void Architect defenders. "Protect Thexina!" Croc roared, his claws extended as he engaged the nearest enemy. Thexina's consciousness became increasingly entangled with the ship's systems as they worked to complete the shutdown sequence. The vast array of information threatened to overwhelm their sense of self. In this moment of crisis, the individual consciousnesses of Thomas and Xena reasserted themselves within Thexina. Their love for each other acted as an anchor, a reminder of their humanity amidst the alien presence trying to subsume them. With renewed focus, Thexina pushed through the final stages of the shutdown sequence. Energy surged through their body, radiating outward to encompass the entire Void Architect fleet. Suddenly, every Void Architect ship powered down. Their weapons fell silent, their shields disappeared. The sudden shift in the battle was palpable, even from within the command ship. As the last echoes of the shutdown command faded, Thexina collapsed. Their hybrid form began to destabilize, the strain of the mental and physical ordeal taking its toll. The force field dissipated, allowing Captain Croc and the team to rush to Thexina's side. The Zorn commander carefully lifted the unconscious hybrid being. "We need to get them back to our ship," Croc said urgently. "Their condition is critical." As they retreated through the now dormant Void Architect vessel, reports of the Alliance's victory flooded in. The sudden deactivation of the enemy fleet had turned the tide both in space and on Novus Prime's surface. But for Thexina's team, the future remained uncertain. They raced back to their ship, the hybrid being's form fluctuating between stability and chaos in Croc's arms. As they prepared for emergency transport back to Novus Prime, Captain Croc looked down at the unconscious Thexina. The being that had saved them all now teetered on the brink of existence, their fate unknown. The ship's engines roared to life, carrying them away from the conquered Void Architect command vessel and back towards an uncertain future. The battle was over, but for Thexina, the real struggle was just beginning. The ship's engines thrummed as they sped towards Novus Prime, carrying precious cargo, the unconscious form of Thexina, whose very existence now hung in the balance. Captain Croc cradled the hybrid being, his scaled hands gentle despite their appearance. "Hold on," he murmured, watching as Thexina's form flickered between stability and chaos. As soon as they touched down on Novus Prime, medical teams swarmed the ship. Dr. Ilara Singh, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, took charge immediately. "Get them to the specialized medical bay," she ordered, her voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. Thexina was rushed through sterile corridors, their unstable forms secured on a hovering gurney. Dr. Singh kept pace, her eyes fixed on the readouts from her handheld scanner. The hybrid's vital signs fluctuated wildly, each spike and dip a potential harbinger of disaster. In the medical bay, a team of Zalarian and human doctors worked in concert, their movements a carefully choreographed dance of urgency and precision. Dr. Singh's fingers flew across holographic displays, adjusting parameters and analyzing data streams. "Their merged form is destabilizing at the molecular level," she announced, her voice taut with concentration. "We need to stabilize them before we can even consider separation." As the medical team fought to save Thexina, the Alliance leaders gathered in a nearby conference room. The air was thick with tension as they debated the next course of action. Colonel Harris, his uniform, crisp despite the chaos of recent events, paced the room. We need Thomas and Xena back, he argued, his voice firm. Their individual expertise is crucial for dealing with the aftermath of this invasion. Ambassador Zara, her luminescent skin dimmed with concern, shook her head. Thexina represents the unity of our peoples, she countered. To separate them now could be seen as a step backward. Captain Elena Rodriguez, fresh from leading the enhanced fleet, leaned forward in her chair. With all due respect, Ambassador, she said, her voice carrying the weight of recent battle, I believe Thomas and Xena's combined knowledge would be more valuable in two separate, enhanced individuals. We need their unique perspectives now more than ever. As the debate continued, an urgent message flashed across the room's central display. Captain Croc's face appeared, his expression grim. We're detecting strange energy readings from the captured Void Architect command ship, he reported. Our scientists are working to decode the systems, but we may have a new crisis on our hands. The news sent a ripple of tension through the room. Colonel Harris turned to Dr. Singh, who had just entered to provide an update on Thexina's condition. Doctor, what's the status of the separation procedure? Dr. Singh took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting the weight of the decision before them. I've developed a procedure that could potentially separate Thomas and Xena while preserving their enhanced abilities, she explained. However, I must stress that this is highly experimental. There's no guarantee of success, and the risk to both individuals is significant. Before anyone could respond, another alert sounded. The energy readings from the Void Architect ship had intensified. Captain Croc's voice came through again, urgent and strained. We've discovered a hidden failsafe mechanism, he reported. It's a self-destruct sequence that could potentially destroy Novus Prime and several neighboring star systems. The room erupted into a flurry of activity. Colonel Harris turned to Dr. Singh, his decision made. Begin the separation procedure immediately, he ordered. We need Thomas and Xena's expertise to deal with this new threat. Dr. Singh nodded, her face set with willpower. She rushed back to the medical bay, barking orders to her team as she went. The specialized facility hummed to life, Zalarian biotechnology interfacing seamlessly with Dr. Singh's latest version of the enhancement serum. Thexina's unconscious form was carefully positioned in the center of the room. Dr. Singh took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the activation switch. Initiating separation procedure, she announced, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. A brilliant light engulfed Thexina as the procedure began. The hybrid's body began to shimmer, their form becoming less distinct as the separation process took hold. Dr. Singh and her team worked tirelessly, adjusting parameters and stabilizing vital signs as Thexina's body gradually split into two distinct entities. As the procedure progressed, the team aboard the Void Architect ship faced their own challenges. The ship's complex alien architecture proved difficult to navigate, and residual defense systems activated sporadically, hindering their progress. Back in the medical facility, the separation reached a critical stage. Neural activity spiked dangerously as Thomas and Xena's individual consciousnesses began to reassert themselves. Alarms blared as their vital signs fluctuated wildly. "We're losing them!" one of the assistants cried out. Dr. Singh gritted her teeth, her fingers dancing across the control panel. "Increase power to the stabilization field," she ordered. "We need to guide their consciousnesses back to their individual bodies." As if in response to her words, a strange calm settled over the room. The readings on the monitors began to stabilize, and the shimmering forms on the medical platform slowly coalesced into two distinct shapes. With a final surge of energy, the separation was complete. Where Thexina had lain, Thomas and Xena now rested side by side, their bodies altered but unmistakably their own. Dr. Singh quickly assessed their vital signs, relief washing over her face. "They're stable," she announced. "The separation was successful." As Thomas and Xena began to stir, their eyes opening to a world they now saw through enhanced senses, an urgent message came through. The team on the Void Architect ship was struggling to disable the self-destruct mechanism. Thomas and Xena looked at each other, a wordless understanding passing between them. Despite their weakened state, they knew what they had to do. "We need to get to that ship," Thomas said, his voice hoarse but determined. Xena nodded, already moving to stand. Our experience as Thexina might be the key to stopping this. Dr. Singh opened her mouth to protest, but the look in their eyes stopped her. She knew that the fate of Novus Prime, and possibly the entire sector, now rested in their hands. As Thomas and Xena prepared for emergency transport to the Void Architect's ship, the weight of their shared experiences hung between them. They were separate once more, yet forever changed by their time as one being. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their bond transcending the boundaries of their respective species. The transport pad hummed to life, enveloping them in a shimmering field of energy. As they dematerialized, Thomas reached out, his fingers intertwining with Xena's. In that moment, on the cusp of their next great challenge, they were united not by forced merger, but by choice, a testament to the strength of their connection and the power of their shared purpose. Dedication. Their fingers still intertwined, they materialized aboard the Void Architect's ship, their enhanced senses immediately absorbing the alien environment around them. Captain Croc met them as they stepped off the transport pad, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "We're running out of time," he said, leading them through the twisting corridors. "The self-destruct sequence is accelerating, and we can't make heads or tails of their systems." Thomas and Xena moved in perfect synchronicity, their enhanced bodies adapting quickly to the ship's strange gravity. As they approached the central control room, they could feel the vibrations of the building energy coursing through the ship's structure. "There," Xena pointed, her newly heightened vision picking out a pulsing node in the corner of the room. "That's the core of the self-destruct mechanism." Thomas nodded, already moving towards it. "I can see the energy pathways," he said, his hands hovering over the alien console. "It's similar to the systems we interfaced with as Thexina, but more complex." As they worked to decipher the Void Architect technology, their minds seamlessly shared information, building on their combined experiences. Captain Croc and his team watched in awe as Thomas and Xena's hands flew over the controls, their movements perfectly coordinated. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the ship. "Energy buildup critical," a mechanized voice announced. "Detonation imminent." "We need more time," Xena said, her voice strained with concentration. Thomas placed his hand on her shoulder, and a surge of energy passed between them. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. Together, they pressed their palms against the core of the self-destruct mechanism. A blinding light filled the room as Thomas and Xena channeled the ship's energy through their bodies. Their skins shimmered, absorbing and redirecting the volatile power. The ship's systems fluctuated wildly, but the self-destruct sequence began to slow. "It's working," Captain Croc exclaimed, checking his readings. "The energy levels are stabilizing." With a final surge of effort, Thomas and Xena completed the shutdown sequence. The ship's systems powered down, the threat of destruction averted. They stumbled back, exhausted but triumphant. As they returned to Novus Prime, news of their success spread quickly. The Alliance leaders gathered to welcome them, their faces a mix of relief and admiration. Colonel Harris stepped forward, his usual stern expression softened with gratitude. "Thomas, Xena," he said, "your actions today have saved countless lives. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Before they could respond, Dr. Singh approached, her eyes wide with excitement. "I've been monitoring your biosigns," she said, holding up her scanner. "The changes in your physiology are remarkable. I'd like to run some tests if you're willing." Thomas and Xena exchanged a glance, then nodded. "Of course, Doctor," Thomas said. "If our experiences can help the Alliance, we're more than willing to participate." Over the next few days, Thomas and Xena underwent a series of tests in Dr. Singh's lab. They pushed their bodies to new limits, discovering abilities they never knew they possessed. Their skin could now absorb and redirect various forms of energy, while their mental link had strengthened to an unprecedented degree. During a particularly intense session, Thomas found himself able to perceive Xena's sensory experiences from across the facility. "I can see through your eyes," he said in wonder, describing the view from her location with perfect accuracy. Dr. Singh was ecstatic. "This could revolutionize our understanding of human potential," she said, furiously taking notes. "Your enhanced physiology seem to be continuing to evolve, unlocking even greater abilities." As fascinating as these developments were, Thomas and Zena's attention was soon pulled back to the ongoing conflict. Captain Elena Rodriguez had been leading successful strikes against the remaining Void Architect outposts, using strategies developed from the intelligence they had gathered. In a strategy meeting, Captain Rodriguez delivered her report. "We've pushed them back significantly," she said, indicating the star map. "But they're becoming increasingly desperate. We need to end this soon." As if on cue, an urgent message flashed across the room's main display. A massive Void Architect construct had appeared at the edge of known space, dwarfing anything they had encountered before. The room erupted into chaos as the Alliance leaders debated their next move. Thomas and Zena stepped forward, their bodies emitting a soft glow. "We have a plan," they said in unison, their voices carrying a weight of certainty that silenced the room. All eyes turned to them as they began to outline their daring strategy to infiltrate and neutralize this new threat, drawing on their unique abilities and shared experiences to offer hope in the face of this final daunting challenge.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.